أفلا يتدبرون القرآن
ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most wise, revealed the Qur'an unto the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam with the comprehensive way of life. A book that covers all what's in the affairs of the human beings, individually, community-wise, nations, all over the earth. Doesn't matter what time, what place. It's a book miraculous by nature, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that in the Qur'an all what the human beings are in need of, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most high, the most wise, beliefs, acts of worship, manners, rulings, economy, anything that a person might think that would govern the lives of the human beings. We would find general terms, specific terms mentioned in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. One of which the rulings that people are in need of. Human beings, some of them, they have evil acts and some of them are righteous. And even in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah we heard that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the angels that He is to create, He will create Adam alayhi salam, the angels, they said, قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. That the angels, they knew about the nature of the human beings. They said you would create on the face of earth those who would spread corruption and they would shed blood. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, I know what you know not. So the human beings, as a fact, they shed blood. Some of them, they cause evil and they kill and they rob and they do all kinds of forms of mischief. So how can these people be dealt with on the face of earth? We know in the hereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with them with justice and mercy for the believers and so on. But matters of life to govern the lives of the human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed verses in the Qur'an that governs the lives of the human beings. Not in the ideal state, but in cases where people will cause mischief and corruption and killing and so on. And one of which matters of retribution. People killing one another. What are the rulings that governs the lives of the human beings, that people should rule by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Matters of the will. Someone is about to die and to write a legal will. Is this something left for the human beings to write whatever they like to whoever they want? Or this can cause injustices and hatred among relatives and kin and kith and so on. And because of that, and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the human beings from the evil within their own selves, by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the Qur'an verses that would govern and regulate these types of affairs in the lives of the human beings, for them to live a goodly life on the face of earth, to establish the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to seek the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter. And this is something that we would see, inshallah ta'ala, in this episode, in verses of Surah Al-Baqarah from 178 till 182. Verses from 178 to 182. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the first two verses, talks about Al-Qisas, or legal attribution. The verses says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم القصاص في القتلى الحر بالحر والعبد بالعبد والأنثى بالأنثى فمن عفي له من أخيه شيء فاتباع بالمعروف وأداء إليه بإحسان ذلك تخفيف من ربكم ورحمة فمن اعتدى بعد ذلك فله عذاب أليم ولكم في القصاص حياة يا أولي الألباب لعلكم تتقون. Which means, O you who believe, prescribed for you is legal retribution for those murdered, the free for the free, the slave for the slave, and the female for the female. But whoever overlooks from his brother anything, then there should be a suitable follow-up and payment to him with good conduct. This is an alleviation from your Lord and a mercy. But whoever transgresses after that will have a painful punishment. And there is for you in legal retribution saving of life. There is life in it. O you people of understanding, that you may become righteous. So in these two verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling the believers. This is a call to the believers, those who submit themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willingly. Those who would follow the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they put forward the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before anything, whether it's their intellectual abilities, their likings, their desires, because either the believers, they would follow the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they would follow their desires. So the call to the believers as an ummah, as a nation, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. And as we heard before, once we hear this beautiful call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hearts of the believers have so much joy once they hear this call from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would immediately become their concern is to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. They've been honored to be among the believers. Comes after it, either an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers to do, or something that they are forbidden from doing. So here, to the nation of the Muslims, for them to rule according to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِصَاصُ فِي الْقَتْلِ. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُم. Prescribed for you, something that is mandatory on you, something that you don't have a choice in, something that you have to submit yourselves. It's an obligation from the most wise subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the human being, the one that knows their whims and desires and affairs and so on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, prescribed unto you al-qisasu fil qatl. Al-qisas is retribution, but the legal one, something that is equal punishment, something that has justice in it. In fil qatl, meaning for those murdered. We know that life is such a precious thing, something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for the human beings. We are given life without asking for it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gave us this life. And a person is born and raised, something that is so precious that it's the most valuable thing in the life of the human being, that people would spend their wealth and all what they have to save their own lives. And this is something that is common among the human beings. And for someone, a human being, to take the life of others, this is such an evil thing, especially if it's done against the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why there is nothing worse when it comes to crimes after associating partners with Allah. Because the worst crime that can ever be committed on the face of earth is to associate partners with Allah, because it negates the purpose of our life. The whole life is established for what reason? For people to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So this is the worst crime, is to associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then after that comes killing. Taking one's life without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such an evil act. And as a result of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering the believers on the face of earth to apply the legal retribution for those who are murdered. Something that is equal in punishment. If someone would choose willingly a premeditated crime to kill someone, a soul, then the punishment, the justice is for that person, the killer, to be killed in the same manner, or to be killed, and according to the, of course, the law of justice and the court and so on. Not something that people would do on an individual basis. It's not permissible for the individual to do that and to apply this order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a call for those who are in charge, the legal system, that in any place they should apply this, the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-qisasu fil qatl. And this is the justice of the deen of Islam. Something that, as we would see in the next verse, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ, something that brings life in a society. It saves life. How is that? When the order is to kill those who killed, right? With the certain conditions, of course, and not anybody that killed, because sometimes killing might happen as a result of a mistake or things of that nature. This is not what is meant here. This is someone that would kill with a premeditated killing and so on and so forth. So the ruling is to kill the killer. So someone might say that this would cause more people to be killed. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that this is, in that ruling, is saving of many, many lives. And this is the wisdom behind the legal system in the religion of Islam. The capital punishments in Islam, not as some people might think, or the enemies of Islam, they would spread the misunderstanding and the doubtful matters among the believers, saying that the capital punishment in Islam is so harsh and severe that will cause people to have their hands cut off and for people to be killed and so on. It doesn't work this way. And in any place, if this is applied in the proper way in history, speaks loud in this regards. It protects and saves lives. It protects one's wealth and decreases, if not diminishes completely, the criminals in any society. If someone knows that if he kills another, that he will be killed, not to stay in the prison for a few years and then a person can leave afterwards. If they know that they will be killed as a result of this vicious act, definitely many people won't come forward to commit such an evil act. That's why this is how lives are saved. And we would see in societies, when they do not apply such justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered, many killings in many societies that are suffering so much. There's no security. To have a security in a society, this is one of the most precious things in one's life. And for a person to lose this basics in one's life is to have security in one's life and one's wealth. Once this is threatened, that there's no happiness on the face of earth. And you would find many societies on the face of earth, because the legal punishment is not such a precise one, people they kill. And sometimes they don't care if they would stay in prison, but they need to see the other side suffer so much. So they would kill them, and they don't see any big harm in being in prison, eating and drinking. And sometimes prison is better for them than living outside of it. So, and anyway, whether people would understand that or comprehend it or not, it's the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most wise. That's why the believers, when they read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best and we do not know. And that's why we don't know what is good for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. So this is the rule from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers to establish such law of justice, that al-qisas, or legal retribution, is part of our system as Muslims. Al-hurru bil-hurri wal-abdu bil-abd. And that's the issue of being the equality in punishment. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the free for the free and the slave for the slave. Meaning, if a free man kills a free man, then he is to be applied on him. The legal retribution is for him to be killed. And a slave killing a slave, the same thing, a slave should be killed then as a result of killing. And also, if a slave kills a free man, also is to be applied the legal retribution on him. And also a free man killing a slave, which is something that is established by the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the verse is talking about what normally would happen as far as equality in punishment. وَالْأُنْثَى بِالْأُنْثَى. And a woman also, or a female for the female. Also, if male kills a female, he is to be also killed by the legal system, and the opposite is true. But here the verse again is stating those who are equal to one another, but it does not negate or undermine the other different situations, which is mentioned in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that those who would kill, again with the conditions being met and fulfilled, again this is in the legal system, then the ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is for al-qisas, for the legal retribution. In the religion of Islam, which is different than the nations before, and this is something that was revealed in the books before, in the Torah and in the books before, this was the ruling that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the believers to apply. But something that is new in the religion of Islam, in the final revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for His servants, that He opened the way for even something else to save one's life. And that is, فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ شَيْءٍ. That if someone pardons, if someone overlooks from his brother anything, someone that might accept the diya, or instead of being killed, blood money is to be given. And this is part of the deen of Islam, that the ones that has the power to accept it or not are the blood relatives of the murdered one. So if they would accept, instead of the legal retribution and for the murderer to be killed, they can say he is to be killed, and they would get retaliated for, and they would have themselves been satisfied by having the justice served. And also they have the choice to forgive and to take the diya instead, to take the blood money instead of the killing, or they can forgive and pardon altogether. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave for the family of the murdered one. These are rulings in matters of fiqh, matters of governing the lives of the community in large, because as we heard, human beings, they're not all in the ideal situation. Some of them, they commit evil acts, and because this religion is such a perfect way of life, such a comprehensive way of life, so even rulings that governs those who would act in an evil way, we have rulings in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that would bring all what is good in a society. We continue inshallah ta'ala right after the break, so stay with us.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Still in verse 178 and 179 from Surah Al-Baqarah that deals with matters of al-qisas, or legal retribution, that this is an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the believing ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, for them to have a goodly life, a life that is saved from things that would threaten their security. People are in need of security to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the proper way. We should not ignore the bigger picture, which is the purpose of our life, and that is to establish the ubudiyyah, the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person is in fear for one's life or wealth, then this person won't be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most perfect way. That's why the believing men and women in a society, they would take the means to provide the security for the people, for them to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the proper way. And there are people, those who would try to threaten this security by killing others, by spreading corruption. So that justice has to be served. And as we heard, the rulings and the capital punishments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered in the Qur'an is to save lives, and to save one's wealth, and to bring the security in a society. Not a punishment or a system that will cause many people to lose their hands and lives and so on. This is not, of course, the case. History proved that this is a system that would prevent so much of the evil that is spread all over the earth, and it's enough that this is the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of which is the legal retribution, that people should be retaliated for in a legal way. If they killed, then they are to be killed. And this was in the nations before, but in the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even made it easier for them, that the family of the murdered, they can forgive, or they can take the blood money and not for the murderer to be killed. فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ شَيْءٍ. And if they would accept the blood money, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even ordered them to do it in a decent way, in matters of ma'ruf, and matters of which is something that is goodness. فَاتِّبَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَأَدَاءٌ إِلَيْهِ بِإِحْسَانٍ. They should seek the blood money in a good way. Although, again, this is someone that killed the relative. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them to take it in a good way, with good conduct, and for those who would give the family of the murderer وَأَدَاءٌ إِلَيْهِ بِإِحْسَانٍ. To give the blood money with goodness, with ihsan. See, so even although the matter is such a severe one, and a strong one, and a difficult one in one's self, that is involves killing and so on, still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to deal with it with the best conduct. So you can imagine in times of ease and relationships, what is the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is to live and to act with the best conduct ever, and this is the life of the believers. ذَلِكَ تَخْفِيفٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ. That this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it alleviation, ease, matters of ease for the believers, and a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Takhfif, alleviation, because it's not just about someone murders someone, then he is to be killed, but open the door for someone to save even their own life, even though they killed someone else, is if the family would forgives. And this is takhfif, definitely an alleviation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that people can deal with one another with such a mercy and so on. فَمَنْ اعْتَدَى بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَلَهُ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. But whoever transgresses after that will have a painful punishment. After they accepted the blood money, after they take the blood money, if they would retaliate and they would kill the murderer, right, then in that case they should suffer a severe punishment, because again this is something, or retaliation is to be done in a legal way, in the proper way, in the court of law, according to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to be left to people and their desires, and which causes corruption and mischief on the face of earth. Imagine that people can have the means to retaliate. Someone harms another person, so he would retaliate, and people would do that, going back and forth without referring back to the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the reasons, and in some societies some people might not go to the legal system, is because of the loose nature of the legal system. There's no real justice being served. Although people might think that any punishment is justice, no, not any punishment. Someone taking the life of another, right, and the family of the deceased, they would ask for retaliation, and instead the legal system is to imprison the murderer. So sometimes the shaitan will come to them and whisper to them that they would retaliate physically. Even if that's the law of the land, it is not permissible for the people to apply the rulings that is mentioned in the Qur'an. It's not permissible for them. Something that has to be in the court of law. Something that has to be established by those who are in charge. If they don't establish that, then it is not for the individual person to take matters in their own hands, and they would apply these capital punishments and so on. So you see the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it stops the enmity. And we see in some countries there is a chain of retaliations from one generation to the other, in big families and tribes, as a result of not serving the justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered. So you'd find families keep on killing from one another, retaliating from one another, because they know that the system won't give them the justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered. Their actions is evil, definitely. They should not take matters in their own hands, but at the same time, justice should be served according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered. And you see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving and opening the door for those who afflicted by such a crime, one of them had been killed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calling them to forgive and to accept the blood money. See how mercy that is. And that brings harmony among a society and so on. But if they refuses and they still would ask for the other side to be murdered, this is their right. But if they would forgive, it's up to them. They would get rewards for such a thing, and this is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they choose that, and that means to take the blood money, then they should not transgress. Otherwise, a severe punishment would be applied to them. That's why when we see this beautiful ruling, matters of justice and a higher level of mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That in al-qisas, in this legal retribution, you have hayah, you have life in it. And it's such a beautiful statement in the Arabic language that no words can fit this beautiful meaning. And the Arabs, they would try to say something that is close to that meaning, but they cannot bring the like of such a miraculous statement. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ. Not like the killing will be means of saving lives. No, in the qisas, in the legal retribution, you have life in it. If you read the sentence, for the first instance you would think, how can al-qisas or legal retribution, which means killing the murderer, would bring life? It's been explained. If people would apply this, how many lives would be saved? People sometimes they think, after a person kills someone, they think of, oh, how can we kill someone and so on, and they would feel merciful towards the killer, but they forget about the one that has been killed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering the believers and showing to them that if they would apply this justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many of the killings that occurs all over the earth, it can be saved when people know that they would be killed if they would kill others. And that's why there is haya in it. And that's the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that human beings are deficient. Human beings are deficient, yes. Even if it's systems and very smart people and legal people and so on and so forth, if they do not apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are deficient. They do not know what is good for them. They try to please the human beings, but in reality you would see societies, there's no security in them. People living in fear, so much killings, in which if people would apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, life will be saved. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ. That shows the miraculous nature of the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the religion of Islam. It's a perfect way of life that brings all that is good on the face of earth and in the hereafter. And it shows the comprehensive nature of the deen of Islam. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Those who have sound minds, they would understand very well that this is the great wisdom from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this justice to be served. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So that you would have taqwa and piety and to be righteous, for you to apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for you to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most perfect way. So this is in brief some of the rulings when it comes to legal retribution. It's part of our deen. The details of that in verses in the Qur'an, in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in the application of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the early generations of Islam, a very perfect and comprehensive system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained in the revelation from Allah. This is part of our religion. And again, we have to witness the perfection of the deen of Islam, that it governs all of the different needs of the human beings. Other ways of life, they don't have this perfectness in matters of rulings and so on. And that also refutes the call of those who would say we have to separate religion from state and so on. In the religion of Islam, we don't have such a thing. In the religion of Islam, everything is part of our religion. Whether it's the matters of legal or judicial systems or economy or politics or individual behavior or worship or beliefs, everything is explained in the Qur'an and in the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the beauty of this deen. And it brings all that is good. And if human beings try all means and forms of legal ways, they would still suffer. And they would still fall into so much deficiencies because they are not following the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And this is something that we need to witness as Muslims. Then the second thing is, which is part also of the rulings in these set of verses, is matters of a legal will. Someone that is about to die, people write their wills. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also ordering the believers to observe some of the rulings to govern this. As it's mentioned in the verse number 180, 181, 182, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين والأقربين بالمعروف حقا على المتقين فمن بدله بعدما سمعه فإنما إثمه على الذين يبدلونه إن الله سميع عليم فمن خاف من موص جنفا أو إثما فأصلح بينهم فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. Which means, prescribed for you when death approaches any one of you, if he leaves wealth, is that he should make a will, a bequest, for the parents and near relatives according to what is acceptable, a duty upon the righteous. Then whoever alters the bequest after he has heard it, the sin is only upon those who have altered it. Indeed, Allah is hearing and knowing. But if one fears from the bequether some error or sin, and corrects that which is between them, there is no sin upon him. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. So this set of verses talks about someone that is approaching death. Death is a reality, inevitable thing that all human beings they believe in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned death in many verses in the Qur'an, something that we need to remember all the time, as the Prophet ﷺ ordered us. He ordered us, the Prophet ﷺ, to remember death. أَكْثِرُوا ذِكْرَ هَذِهِ مِنْ لَذَّةِ. Mention the destroyer of desires, which is death, a lot. Why? Because if you're having a long hope that would make you commit a sin, it would control that long hope that would make the person commit sins. Or if a person is sad and afflicted by calamities, remembering death brings comfort. Why? Because this life is meant for a certain purpose. It's temporary. And what's the purpose of our life? Is to establish the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we shall all return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a person is about to die, we know that people have wealth and possessions and things of that nature. And they would leave that behind to those who are alive after them. And many people, as a result of injustices when it comes to the things that are left behind, it will cause enmity among people. And we see that in many societies. When a person would commit injustice in writing a will, a person having children or wife or whatever there is, and he would write his will, and if it's up to the person, being angry with his wife or his children or whatever there is, and he would write his will for an institution or for a dog sometimes or whatever there is, and you would see wealth being wasted and a person committing injustice to those who are close to him, those who are relatives to him, and so on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. He's the most just and the most merciful subhanahu wa ta'ala, ordering the believers to witness the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by applying the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is the ruling here? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering the believers, if death approaches, meaning the means that usually physically means that the person is approaching one's end of one's life, like being severely sick or very old age, and we cannot expect when death will come. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ ordered us that we should have a will, that we should not spend the night without having a will, especially if someone that has debts on, or something that rights that are attached to others. A person should make sure that rights are not being lost if he dies. Sometimes people take loans from one another without registering such a loan, for example. If somebody dies, this money belongs to the inheritors. And if they don't write this down, if they don't register this and make it clear, then rights can be lost and people might lose their wealth and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, even governs the lives of the human beings, of the believers, by ordering them to do what is good to prevent injustices among one another. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordering the believers to leave al-wasiyya, or the legal will. Here in this verse says, لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, to the parents and to the relatives, بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, with goodness. This verse, some of the ulama said that it's been abrogated, cancelled, by the verses in the beginning of Surah An-Nisa that talks about laws of inheritance. Because we know that those who would have inheritance by the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is not permissible for a person to write any share for them, because they would already get a fixed share mentioned in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So you are not to write anything extra for them. As the Prophet ﷺ said, لَا وَصِيَّةَ لِوَارِثٍ, that it's not permissible to write a will, meaning that you would say this type of wealth, this amount of wealth is for my mother or my father, or those who would already would inherit from the person. It's not permissible to write something for them, because they would already get their share. They would get their fixed share mentioned in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the will is to write according to one's 1/3 of one wealth, which is the maximum, to other than those who would legally inherit after a person dies. Many rulings, but briefly, inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about that right after the break, so stay with us, inshallah.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن.
Ark of Noah.
We're going to be mentioning the significance of the Ark of Noah.
Knowledge is the essence of everything. Once you get the knowledge, then it generates the desire and the motivation, and then it brings about the action.
And we're going to be discussing the state of the Ummah and the division which unfortunately has appeared in it, and the methodology of trying to arrive at the right path.
Your system of knowledge or your system of motivation are hit by any of these threats, you will definitely go astray and you will be suffering from a disease in the heart.
We're also going to be discussing what Allah wants from us.
How can we make that? Allah gave us the revelation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing first and foremost the companions. If they believe in what you have believed in, then they are guided. So the real guidance is what the Prophet ﷺ and the companions were upon.
Join Shaykh Mutassim in the program Ark of Noah and discover the answers to these questions.
كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Still in the topic of the legal will, and verses in Surah Al-Baqarah that talks about the legal will, but in this verse 180 talks about the will to the parents and to those who are close by relatives with matters of goodness. And again, as we heard, the rulings of this is conditioned that if a person has someone that would legally inherit, automatically would inherit by the laws of inheritance mentioned in the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, then it is not permissible for a person to write something for them. But a person can write up to 1/3, and 1/3 is a lot, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And that's why Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhum and others, they said 1/5 is good. 1/5 of one's wealth, if a person write in his will, 1/5 only to other than those who would inherit according to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a good thing to give charity to others or something that is to be written in the will. But a person has up to 1/3. Over 1/3 is not permissible. And if a person writes in his will more than 1/3 of his wealth to be given to others, then it should only be applied to the 1/3, and then what's over that is to be distributed according to those who would inherit, according to the fixed shares or so, as it's mentioned in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is something, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ. This is something that is prescribed unto those who are righteous, those who are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they don't follow their desires in it, but they would follow the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether they like a certain individual or not. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed a fixed share to them in matters of inheritance, then things should be left to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the most perfect. People should have the certainty in this. And then the verse, فَمَنْ بَدَّلَهُ بَعْدَمَا سَمِعَهُ فَإِنَّمَا إِثْمُهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يُبَدِّلُونَهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Then whoever alters the bequest, alters the legal will. Sometimes people might say it with their own tongue, which is valid. Someone in his deathbed, for example, and he would say that this wealth or this amount of wealth is to be given to this mosque, masjid, for example, right? If it's less than 1/3, such a will should be fulfilled, and people should not break one's will. But if somebody heard this and they altered it, or it's a written will and they altered things in it, or they forged something, then definitely this is a sin. Why? Because the owner of the wealth, after he dies, since the will is to be implemented after one's death, and that's what al-wasiyya is. The legal will is not to be implemented and applied when a person is alive. If a person is alive, it's not a will. It's gifts, it's something else. But a will meaning that a person after he dies or she dies, then is to be applied. And they would open their will and they would read it and they would fulfill what's in it according to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without committing a sin, without breaking the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If somebody writes in a will that a portion of his wealth is to be given to some sinful act, is it permissible for people to fulfill one's will? They say that this is his will. No, it's not permissible. إنما الطاعة في المعروف. Obedience is only in matters of goodness. So if a person alters the will, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning them. فَإِنَّمَا إِثْمُهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يُبَدِّلُونَ, that the sin is on those who alters the will. إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ, warning them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Sami' is hearing, and Alim, knowing. He's the all-hearer, the all-knower subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sami', Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears what people say, even if they are alone, even if it's a secret council. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is all watcher over them. So they should be watchful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They only speak what is right. They should not, if they think that they are deceiving human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening to them. And they will be punished if they do not repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will be exposed, if it's not on the face of earth, in the hereafter. And their wealth, they would lose the blessings in their wealth, and so on and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Sami'un Alim. He hears and He knows subhanahu wa ta'ala the intentions of others, those who would try to commit harm to those inheritors. A person might enter the hellfire by writing an unjust will. Yeah, an owner of wealth, right, before he dies, he would write a will that full of injustices, depriving those who would legally inherit from their rights, or giving a portion of one's wealth to something that is haram or not permissible for us to give, and so on and so forth. That's why a person has to be careful, being watchful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a warning for us, for the believers, for everyone, that we do the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered, and to stay away from things that might cause a person to suffer in one's grave and one's hereafter. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, فَمَنْ خَافَ مِن مُوصٍ جَنَفًا أَوْ إِثْمًا فَأَصْلَحَ بَيْنَهُمْ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ, those who fears from the bequeather some error or sin, and corrects that which is between them, there is no sin upon him. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. Those who would bring peace among people, especially when it comes to matters of will and legal will, especially if they fear janafan aw ithman, something of alteration, something of transgression, something of sin, and they would bring peace between one another, so that there's no transgression, there's no sin, there's no alteration to one's will, and so on and so forth. Then there's no sin on the person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver, and He is the most merciful subhanahu wa ta'ala. He forgives His slaves. If people would turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver, He is the most merciful. No matter how much evil a person committed, if a person sincerely turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and returning and fulfilling the promises and the rights that has been taken from others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver, the most merciful. As long as we're still alive, as long as the souls did not reach one's throat before one's death, as long as the sun did not rise from the west, which is one of the major signs of the hereafter, a person, the gates of repentance is wide open for people to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never give up on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the vast mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verses that governs the lives of the believers, that we would benefit from it, that the religion of Islam, or to be righteous, is not in one aspect of the religion. It's not just in matters of belief, something in the heart. It's not just in establishing the salah. It's in all of our lives. In everything in our life, we have something when it comes to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why when we see, as a result of many people not learning the rules and the religion of Islam, they would fall into so much sins as a result of that. And they might be righteous, or they think that they are righteous. They establish the salah and so on, but they commit injustice when it comes to the legal will. Or they do not understand the systems, and those people, those who are in charge of the Muslims, they don't apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in matters of capital punishments, or applying the sharia, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would fall into these major sins and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we take from this many benefits, one of which we need to learn these rulings, and we need to witness the perfection in the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that brings all that is good and merciful in societies and in the hereafter as a result of being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We benefit from that we see that the capital punishments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered in the Qur'an and in the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's not to make it difficult for the people as some people might think, but it's according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that it has life in it. It saves lives, brings security. That's why, again, human beings are living in a mess nowadays. And if they would return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and worship Him alone, and apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. Their life would be totally different. They would feel the security, they would feel the comfort, and they would be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the proper way. And we see how the work of the shaitan, the work of the devil, and the work of those who are disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how they are spreading corruption on the face of earth. The Qur'an opened our eyes to see what is right and what is wrong. The righteous ones, those who would apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are the reasons and the means for people happiness on the face of earth. Those who might say nice words, but they are not obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would only bring the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into their nations. They would bring only what is harmful to their nations if they would disobey the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they might say things and adorn evil to the people by saying, having lenient punishments according to their own understanding that can cause mischief and corruption on the face of earth. And we see that true in many places on the face of earth. We should always remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ. You have life in the legal retribution. If you apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again in the proper way, by those who are in charge, by the people of knowledge and so on, then that would bring all forms of life, all forms of goodness on the face of earth for people to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see that it's not permissible for the believers to transgress, and it is not permissible for them to deal with others with something that is opposite than being good and matters of ma'roof, and warning those who would disobey the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with severe punishment. We also benefit that, yes, there is legal retribution, but there is the diya, the blood money, if the relatives would agree to receive that instead of having the legal retribution and killing of the murderer. And if they do that, if they accept the blood money, then it's not permissible for them to transgress and to kill or to ask for killing afterwards. And we see the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the perfection of the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even these punishments or these capital punishments is to take the people to reach the level of taqwa, the level of piety and righteousness. That's why if we want to call a society to be righteous, is by following the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the purpose of the ibadah. Also we heard and we learned and we benefit from the rulings of the legal will, that we as Muslims, we should have will, and we should write a will and have witnesses for such a will. And anything in a society that would governs and protects that, it's something that should be done, especially for those who live in the West. And they might not have their wealth to be distributed in the proper way according to the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, then it's something very stressed for them to have in their will that their wealth will be distributed according to the orders of Allah, or according to Islamic center this or that, they would distribute it in the legal way, and they have only up to 1/3 of their wealth to be given to other than the legal relatives or the inheritors. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warning those who would alter the legal will with a severe punishment. Great rulings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not the context of getting into so much details of it, but it directs us to apply this in our life by witnessing the perfection of the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by calling those who are in charge to apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to reflect upon ourselves to make sure that we do not transgress in matters of wills, writing a will, legal will, and to ask the people of knowledge, and to have a will, and to apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most perfect way, to receive the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth and in the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us comprehend our religion. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا